Welcome. In this session, we're going to give you some tips on how do you distinguish intuition from emotional pattern. Why this is so important is because intuition has the ability to bridge the gap toward just about anything you want to fulfill and accomplish, whereas emotional pattern is going to keep you stuck where you are, and it's going to probably take you to the re-experiencing of the things that you've had to face from your past, good, bad, or indifferent. And so when we look to create transformation or an evolution of ourself and our life, we really need to understand and leverage intuition to bridge the gap to the outcomes that we want to achieve and fulfill. And so in order to distinguish intuition from emotional pattern, you actually have to start with the outcome that you're looking to achieve. If we're not giving our unconscious self the right information, then it can't distinguish intuition from emotional pattern, right? You're not going to be able to distinguish intuition from emotional pattern. So number one, we need to know, well, what is it that I'm looking to achieve? What outcome do I want to fulfill? And you need to be as specific as possible. The reason for this is because when you ask the question, when you're looking at making a decision, and you ask the question, could this potentially take me to the outcome? That's your first step to really understanding, is this intuition or emotional pattern? Because when we stop and we ask the objective question, does this have the potential to fulfill my outcome? A lot of times it's an obvious no. Like the evidence in front of us is a clear no, and we tend to ignore that and listen to how we feel instead. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's really an easy one to miss. It's sort of like, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds. And, if I just ask the practical question, will eating the cookie, get me to my ideal weight? We don't need to rely on intuition here. We need to first ask the question, does it have the high probability to take me where I want to go? And if it's a no, then we need to entertain other options. Or same thing, maybe it has to do with a relationship, and you go, man, the vision for relationship I have is I want to be with somebody who I can build a life together with, and somebody I can rely on and have connection with and fun with, and they're financially, they have a financial acuity, they're financially responsible, and so on and so forth. And then, you meet somebody, and they're completely financially irresponsible, and they just declare bankruptcy. Well, when you ask the intuitive question, if you're dating people and that one person is on your list, and you go, could this potentially take me where I want to go? You start to understand how to hone intuition from emotion, because a lot of times emotion's saying, I want to be with this person, or I want to eat that cookie, or I want to do X. But then when we stop and we start asking the objective question, will this take me where I want to go? And we realize that it won't, we can start to distinguish emotional impulse or emotional, sort of tendencies or pattern from the actions that are more likely to produce the outcomes that we're looking for. So first we need to know what's the outcome result we want. Then we got to start asking the question, does this have a high probability to take me where I want to go? And then from there, we can start, getting into the next layer, which is, am I emotional? I know that sounds weird, but intuition is not an emotional event. So if we feel a fear-based state, anxiety or fear or apprehension or guilt or shame or unworthiness, insignificant, and things of that nature, then we know right away we're not aligned with intuition. Very seldom, is a fear-based state going to align you with intuition and the capacity in which you need to fulfill the outcome, because we lose access from a neurological perspective to creative thinking and critical thinking. So we need that in order to access intuition. If our brain isn't kind of turned on, if you will, and if we don't have access to critical and creative thinking from a neurological brain mechanism, then intuition literally can't work for us. And so fear-based states are a good indication we're not aligned with intuition. On the other side of the spectrum, if we feel excited or super joyful or jubilant or super inspired, and it's an emotional event, we feel extremely emotional, then we're probably not aligned with intuition there either, because emotional pattern is active by way of emotion being present in the first place. And so you might go, oh my gosh, well then what am I supposed to do if on the fear-based side of the spectrum and the love-based side of the spectrum I'm not necessarily aligned with intuition? Intuition tends to occur in those moments of centered calm. Right? Not the absence of emotion, but emotion tends to be still. Emotion tends to be centered. You might have experienced that sometimes when you're in the zone, if you're an athlete, It's like there's this absolute focus and clarity, and there's not the absence of feeling or say emotion entirely, but it shows up almost like a centered calm or a centered knowing. And there's not necessarily, an intense emotion one way or the other. And so that's what we want to start looking for in terms of this is intuition. Because usually a centered knowing will occur, then emotions follow. And so we've got to get really good at capturing that window and learning how to expand that window of centered knowing aligned with the outcome that we're looking to achieve and create, and that's our sweet spot. And so if you kind of, leverage these key things, you're going to get better and better at distinguishing intuition from emotional pattern and understanding what the difference is. And now obviously we could spend a lifetime training this and mastering the skill in essence of intuition, right? But this is a great way to get started. So if you just break this down, remember, number one, hey, what's the specific outcome result that I'm wanting to create? Even better if you have a reason for that. What's the specific outcome result I want to create? And then number two, when it comes to choices or decisions that you're making in your life, start asking the question, hey, will this have a high likeliness to take me toward my outcome? Will this choice, will this decision, will this person, will this action, does it have a high likeliness to take me to the outcome that I want to achieve? Or is it unlikely? Or is it clearly not going to produce the result that I'm looking to produce? And then from there, pay attention to your nervous system. What is your nervous system communicating through the emotions that you feel? If you're experiencing an intense fear-based experience, that's emotional pattern. If it's an intense love-based experience, that's emotional pattern. And so what we want to pay attention to is that awareness that strikes us when we're in that centered calm, if you will. We're in that centered knowing, or that moment we're in the zone where it's like something occurs to us, and it just occurs as matter of fact. Yep, this is the way forward. This could work. This is my step. And then emotions are going to follow from there. But we've got to learn to capture that moment of knowing, that moment of clarity, and learn to invest on that moment and invest less on emotional pattern. Now, if we do this, what we will do over time is we will teach the nervous system to actually align emotional pattern with intuition, meaning emotional pattern will support intuition more and more, as opposed to most people, emotional pattern is actively working against intuitive knowing. And so this is what we're going to train over time. We're going to develop this ability, this capacity toward mastering intuition. And then a little extra credit along the way, if you want to just kind of play with one other little detail, until you train emotional pattern to align with intuition, meaning you're directing emotion, and emotion is no longer directing you. You're no longer a prisoner to your emotional pattern. What I find is usually when it comes to achieving something beyond what I know or what I have, in the beginning, my emotions are almost always opposite to intuition. And so intuition says, eat vegetables. And my emotion says cake, right? So it's like, that's just the way it is, right? Intuition will say this person's not that good for you. And then, emotion says, but the sex is great. And we spend a lot of time together. And I don't want to be alone. And so it's like, a lot of times intuition is nudging you in one direction, and emotional pattern is often the advocate for the opposite direction. And so, that is a litmus test that I will often check in on with myself, right? Where I go, do I want to do this thing? Because usually if I want to do it, I know to, do a double check there to make sure it's actually going to take me to that outcome that I want to achieve. So play with this framework and get better and better at accessing intuition, because it is 100% possible to live in that flow state just as you go through your day by day by day. And life takes on a different element when you learn to do that. And so enjoy, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.